Scream often gets misrepresented as something it isn't. Despite how it was directed by late horror filmmaker Wes Craven back in 1996, the first Scream movie is portrayed as a satirical comedy in the pop culture zeitgeist, a belief that is inaccurate and has misconstrued the film's perception by non-viewers, which until recently included myself. In fact, before watching Scream for the first time recently, I always believed it was more of a funny movie than a scary one due to the way in which it was brought up in online film discussions. I got the impression that it was a comedy rather than a true horror experience, but this impression was wrong. In fact, non-viewers like myself have been misled, much like how Gearbox misled people into believing that Aliens Colonial Marines would be a good Alien game. Indeed, Scream's reputation was faulty because it's actually a legit horror movie, not a comedy like Bruce Willis's modern acting career. Sure, Scream has comedic moments and has satirical elements, but the movie, while very referential to popular slasher films like Halloween and Friday the 13th, simultaneously works as a riff on popular horror movies and tropes at the time, all while being its own horror film and story that stands up on its own merits. And honestly, it's really good. It has a fun horror movie premise, an iconic slasher who looks like he's trying to be the 10th member of Slipknot, and I enjoyed the sillier elements that added a sense of spice to the film. I like Scream a lot. Scream's positive qualities start with its story. The plot follows Sidney Prescott, who is a high school student dealing with some tough shit. See, a year before the film is set, Sidney's mother was murdered in brutal fashion, and that event has emotionally scarred her. Hell, she has PTSD, because the trauma cuts that deep. However, events get serious quickly for Sidney. In fact, she eventually becomes the focus of a murderous, horror movie-obsessed stalker colloquially known as Ghostface. No relation, who is a villain that likes to play games with people's lives as if it were a casino or a modern-day AAA video game. And with that, Sidney and her friends must hold out against Ghostface in order to survive the week. Scream's narrative is really clever. The movie simultaneously works as a horror film, all while satirizing the slasher genre, balancing thrills and laughs in equal measure, all despite how horror and comedy are two opposing genres. Yet the film handles both of these tones expertly. The laughs and the scares are entirely complementary to one another and don't detract from the overall narrative. It's quite well done. Scream fuses these two polarizing tones through its main character, Sidney Prescott. See, Sidney is written to take the events of the movie seriously, even though those said events can be ridiculous at times. As a character, Sidney is dealing with a lot of trauma, and the film's script and presentation treats that trauma with respect. The movie never pokes fun at or devalues her PTSD. If anything, it is sincere when it comes to portraying Sidney's trauma and her respective characterization. And as a result, we take Sidney's characterization and arc seriously amid all the humorous meta-commentary of the horror genre and the ridiculous and murderous antics of Ghostface. After all, she views Ghosty McChucklefuck's murder spree as horrific and even pathetic, given how much of it references horror movies. And with that, Sidney essentially grounds us into the events of the film. We feel her terror and panic in spite of the over-the-top nature of the film's plot. We empathize with her. Additionally, Scream portrays Ghostface as a dislikable presence. See, in many slasher movies, the films often glorify its iconic villains like Jason Voorhees and their creative kills, making us root for the killer more so than the actual main characters of the films. But Scream doesn't work that way, because honestly, Ghostface is pretty pathetic. Even though his antics can be funny at times, his whole life or death prank call horror movie game show quiz murderous style is eventually revealed to be a pretty disgusting mockery of the people he torments and kills, like he just wants to recreate the events of his favorite horror movies, and ultimately Scream rightfully portrays Ghostface as a loathsome antagonist that shouldn't get the usual hero worship of other slasher icons, though that sadly didn't stop people from doing so. He's a pretty detestable presence, which makes him a good villain. Of course, Scream is a fun movie as well. As a loving ode to late 70s and 80s slasher films, the movie riffs on tropes found in films like Halloween and Friday the 13th in a way that's clever and funny. Whether we are discussing the often on-purpose hokey acting, the concept of the virgin survivor, the twist where the high-profile actress is murdered early on in the film, see Drew Barrymore, or the moments where the audience wants to shout, "Look behind you," at a certain aloof character, Scream lovingly recreates those moments in a way that is simultaneously suspenseful and humorous, because as stated before, despite the often funny and entertaining meta-commentary, we do take the film's violence seriously. The kills and the action, such as they are, do have a weight to them, despite how fun the movie can be. This extends to the mystery regarding the identity of Ghostface as well. Seeing as the movie is very meta and self-aware, Scream toys with the audience in terms of teasing the identity of who the horror movie obsessed Ghostface is. While watching the movie, we wonder if either the film will play into genre convention and pick the obvious candidate as the true identity of this crazed slasher, or if it will go out of left field and reveal an unexpected character due to how self-aware the movie is. And regardless, this constantly keeps us, the viewer, on our toes, because much like the rest of the movie, we don't know what to expect. Scream just consistently surprises. Scream is overall pretty damn great. Even though the horror genre has dramatically changed since the film released back in 1996, the movie is an epic fuckton of fun. The narrative works as a horror movie, the lead character Sidney is sympathetic, its slasher villain in Ghostface is contemptible, the comedic elements can be really funny at times, and its self-referential nature is very clever. It's overall an awesome experience that works as a true horror film despite how funny it is. And sure, Scream may be unconventional, but it is ultimately a pure horror movie. See ya. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment telling me what you think of Scream. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. $1 a month gets you onto my Discord and into this credit sequence, and at least $5 a month allows you to make review requests. The link to the Patreon is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, especially my high tier ones in David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.
Number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.